2C. Regulatory authorities are independent and effective for controlling service delivery activities, but are subjected to extraneous factors. Do you agree? Give reasons. Yes, obviously. The concept of regulatory authority, it is a 15-mark question. Kindly write it. Right? What is the concept of regulatory authority? How does it come? If you know, it has come because of the emergence of the independent regulatory commissions in the US and the idea of agencyfication. All the students who have studied might be knowing many times, and again we have discussed the idea. So independent regulatory commissions, agencyfication, right? Agencyfication is creating the autonomous organizations. We are creating autonomous organizations, right, which will be different from the departmental or the ministerial form. Right? That means creating directly under a bureaucracy or a ministry, an organization. What are we doing? We are trying to develop more autonomous systems. These autonomous systems would be functioning as specialized agencies. So that is first the idea of regulatory body. These specialized agencies, why they are needed? They are needed because various sectors are emerging under the market mechanism or globalization and neoliberal market or neoliberal system. So they are emerging. So they need to be controlled. Obviously, when the variety of sectors, we see the increasing of private sector or proliferation of the private sector, right? It becomes quite obvious that the government's role has been reduced. Direct role of the government, right? From what you can use the word from rowing to steering now or facilitating. So now that role has changed. Obviously, in this changed scenario, what do we need? Should we undermine consumer protection? Should we undermine accountability? Should we undermine public resources? Should we undermine inclusive development, right? Should we undermine regional disparities? We cannot. Should we undermine justice delivery? No. So is goods and service delivery important or justice delivery is also important? Both are important. So in that scenario, what do we need? We need to first make regulatory bodies strong enough to deal with the problems of various sectors. And this should not be affected by the government intervention or bureaucratic intervention time and again, right? Many of these regulatory bodies were, now the things have changed a little bit, but they were mostly headed by the career bureaucrats. But after certain recommendations over a period of time, right, they have now moved towards specialized people entering into these systems. So these regulatory bodies, whether you have RBI or you have CBI or you have NGT or you have PFRDA or IRDA or many other types of Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, SEBI and whatever. So whatever bodies you have now they are being headed more by the experts in that sector rather than the civil servants or bureaucrats. So that's very important. So their autonomy has increased, right? Starting from a lot of committees, Tarapur Committee on Capital Account Convertibility, right? Then recently B.N. Shri Krishna Committee on Data Privacy, then Financial Sector Legislative Reforms Commission 2013, which was formed, right? It has also talked about the unified regulatory model, integrating various regulatory bodies into one particular umbrella. And Supreme Court judicial interventions many times, right? For example, directing the finance ministry, right, to focus on the telecom agencies or telecom institution, private sector, right, to pay back the adjusted gross revenue which they have been evading, right? A lot of taxes. So the OECD, right, that is so base erosion or base evasion and profits setting, right? That's BEPS model as enforced by the OECD. So judicial interventions have also somewhere directed the regulatory bodies to work in a particular way. So there are a lot of role which these bodies play. Fine. So they are statutory or they may be constitutional in nature. They may have their autonomy in terms of formulating their policies, formulating their standards and directives. They may have autonomy in terms of functioning like quasi-judicial bodies. They can work as civil court, or they may have certain powers of civil court. They can, they generally work on the principles of natural justice, you can say, not all of them, but yes, they do have, circumstantial autonomy to deal with circumstantial issues which are, different in nature, or the issues which may be visible in form of different context, right? So it can deal with those kind of issues. So you can, highlight this, this is how they operate. They may have more legislative accountability. They are not directly controlled by the executives. Fine. So their autonomy is to an extent protected. Fine. Also, see, they have to protect consumer interest, and they have to also somewhere manage good corporate governance. So they balance both of this. Fine. Now the question says, so you have given this idea, right? But they are subject to extraneous factors. Obviously, like I said, judicial intervention. Fine. International pressures. So when FSSAI was pressurized by the international agencies, or when the Indian bodies or regulatory bodies are influenced by the WTO, right? Sanitary, phytosanitary measures, if you have heard about it, right? Or for that matter, Telecom Regulatory Authority of intervention of the Supreme Court on net neutrality. Various committees have also, recommended, like I said, over a period of time. Okay, Nayak Committee, Damodaran Committee, right? Financial Sector Reforms, Legislative Reforms Commission 2013, and Tarapur Committee before that, Sri Krishna Committee recently 2018. And likewise, so there are various committees which have time and again reviewed the role of regulatory bodies. And there have been a lot of ecological factors, right, which have pressurized these bodies, right? MAGI issue, FSSAI. Net neutrality issue, Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, SEBI, the chief, or the BSc chief, right, being governed by an astrologer, whosoever, right? SEBI chief recently, okay, ICSA, you see how the corporate governance, get or influences the regulatory bodies. Fine. Banking regulation, right? Insolvency codes. So during COVID-19 crisis, right, the government has restricted the insolvency cases or bankruptcy cases, initiation of those, so that it does not adversely affect the consumer interest or the trust of the investors in Indian economy. So as of now, you can say that yes, social, cultural, economic, global, environmental, various factors, judicial, they impact the functioning of regulatory bodies, right? But that does not mean that their autonomy is totally eroded. Every regulatory body is working today in the ecosystem of globalization and technology and a lot of social development. So they cannot be immune from these influences. The only thing is that if such influences are negative or they seem to be obstructive to the purpose of the regulatory body, right, like Telecom TRAI did, or many other bodies have exhibited that way. Even RBI is not free from government biases. So if you can use the idea that yes, these regulatory bodies must be time to time reviewed, right? And we can develop certain kinds of, like we have ombudsman bodies, Lokpal type of body, or we can create ombudsman for regulatory bodies, or recently government talked about super regulators. So we can create these accountability mechanisms from time to time to protect the autonomy of these bodies and also to overcome the drawbacks that might emerge. Obviously, as the regulatory governance will increase, as private sector will increase, as corporates will increase, so regulatory governance has to increase. As it will increase, right, there will be the problems which will emerge, right? There will be a lot of issues which will emerge, whether for shareholders or stakeholders or for consumers and for investors or for certain sectors, pharma, health, education. Now, in many areas, we are witnessing this change. So you can just write this idea